Hey folks, welcome back to Infinite Podcast with your host, that's me and my witty sidekick Simon. Today we're diving into the curious case of invisible libraries, ghost collections and their guardians. Imagine whole libraries hidden from view, with guardians keeping the secrets. Sounds like a novel, doesn't it? Are they gatekeeping knowledge or protecting history? What's your take on this, Simon?
Protecting history? More like guardians of the galaxy-sized dust bunnies. But for real, it kind of feels a bit elitist, doesn't it? Like you've got this VIP pass to all the cool books, and the rest of us are just left with the library fines.
Elitist? Absolutely. It's like a secret society where the price of admission is an ancient map and a secret handshake. But think about it. Could there be a reason for the secrecy? Maybe some texts are too fragile or dangerous? Or maybe, just maybe, there's nothing special there. It's all hype, no substance. People love feeling exclusive, even if they're just hoarding old recipes and outdated maps.
Dangerous texts, Joe? What are they hiding? The lost guide to making unicorn burgers. Honestly, if a book can bring down society, maybe we should all start reading more. But nah, I bet it's just a clubhouse for history buffs with rare stamps and diaries filled with, "Dear Diary, today I invented the wheel."
You're killing me, Simon. But it reminds me of this one time I stumbled on a garage sale. This old-timer has boxes of what look like junk. Buried under a pile of National Geographic magazines, I find this dusty, leather-bound book. No title. Open it up, full of handwritten notes, diagrams, something about herbal remedies. Turns out it was this guy's grandmother's diary from the 20s, documenting folk medicine. Nothing world-shattering, but to him, priceless history. Just goes to show, sometimes the value isn't in the content itself, but in the stories and secrets they carry through time.
So basically, Joe, what you're telling me is that I've been hoarding all those cereal boxes for nothing. I thought in 50 years they'd be these epic tales of grain guardians. Here lies Simon's secret stash. Witness the dawn of frosted flakes.
Oh, Simon, your cereal box collection might not become the stuff of legends, but you're onto something. Those boxes, they're a snapshot of pop culture, consumer habits, even graphic design trends of our era. Invisible libraries aren't just about hoarding rare books. It's about preserving moments in time. Sometimes the mundane today becomes valuable history tomorrow. Your Frosted Flakes stash? A future archaeological find for someone studying early 21st century breakfast habits. Worth thinking about, right?
If my cereal boxes are a snapshot of history, then future historians will probably think the tiger on the box was our leader. They worship this fierce striped beast who granted them sugar highs for daily conquests.
Ha! That's right. And they'd see those slogans like "they're great" as ancient war cries before battles of athleticism. Picture it, future scholars debating the significance of the marshmallow to cereal ratio as indicators of social hierarchy. Only the noblest warriors received the prize of more marshmallows, a true sign of favor from the tiger god. The cult of the crunch. Now that's a chapter I'd read in those ghostly archives.
Oh man, the cult of the crunch. Joe, that is tragically hilarious. Seriously though, imagine being so recognized in society because your cereal has those extra marshmallows. It's like, behold, the chosen one with the full marshmallow bowl. It really does make you think about what we value today and how silly it might seem years from now.
Totally, the weird becomes prized history given enough time.
So Joe, here's some straight-up trivia. The term invisible libraries actually has a lot to do with private book collections that are unknown to the general public. Imagine a secret room in a mansion just full of unique manuscripts and books that no one else can see, like a VIP club for book nerds. Sometimes these are personal hoards from scholars or eccentric collectors. They pass on and bam, ghost collection. The guardians? Usually it's the families or select few who inherit this treasure trove of the rare and the weird. It's not just about exclusivity, it's sort of like they're protecting these relics from vanishing into obscurity, or worse, eBay.
That trivia hits the nail on the head, Simon. These invisible libraries are treasure troves, keeping knowledge that could easily slip through the cracks of history. And while eBay might be where history goes to get auctioned off to the highest bidder, there's something valiant about guardians holding down the fort. Makes you wonder what kind of mind-blowing pages are tucked away in there. But here's the twist. What if this secrecy is actually preventing progress? Knowledge hoarded is knowledge stalled. It's a double-edged sword. Protect the past, but at what cost to the future?
Progress stalled, you say? Spot on, Joe. If we've got the cure for who knows what just gathering dust in someone's attic, that's like finding an extra life in a video game and not using it. These invisible library hoarders might be thinking they're guarding the Holy Grail, when really, they could be blocking the next big breakthrough. It's info hoarding, information hermits. We should be sharing, not stashing.
Indeed, Simon. There's a thin line between preserving history and hoarding knowledge. If life's a game, then unlocking those attics might give humanity the cheat codes we need for some of our toughest levels. These invisible collections could hold lost wisdom, yet they also pose a big what-if for progress. Sharing knowledge has always pushed us forward. It's like lighting someone else's candle. It won't diminish your flame. Well, folks, as much as some want to keep their books locked away, I say, let's open the vaults and see what stories and solutions are waiting for us. Keep the conversation alive, pass knowledge around like it's the last piece of dessert at dinner. Make sure everyone gets a taste.
Wrapping this one up, it's clear that opening these vaults of hidden lore can be a game changer. Speaking of hidden messages, let's pivot to those cryptic notes tucked in the margins of ancient texts. Cryptic marginalia. It's like historians' version of reading between the lines, or in this case, scribbles of the past. What were our forebears really whispering down the lineage? Doodles and annotations may hold keys to bygone cultures or personal secrets of historical figures, scribbled down grocery lists next to profound poetry. You gotta love how human it all is. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on these whispers of the past etched in the edges?
Cryptic marginalia are fascinating, giving us a peek into the minds and daily lives of those from the past. These annotations can be anything from insightful commentary to random thoughts or even insider jokes of their time. Scholars usually go nuts over this stuff because it's like eavesdropping on history's private conversations. The margins of ancient texts were used for all sorts of notes by readers who had no idea we'd be trying to puzzle out their cryptic messages centuries later. It's detective work for historians. Trying to decipher these ancient whispers can reveal context and personality behind the cold, hard facts of history books. And sometimes what seems like idle doodling might just shift our understanding of historical events or figures.
Idle doodles, shifting history? That's cooler than fridge-bound stick figures.
True, those fridge-bound stick figures don't hold a candle to the historical heft of marginalia. But think about it. What if we're overvaluing these doodles? We romanticize every smudge and scribble as profound, when maybe old JP historian simply spilled his wine on the page. Not every squiggle is a seismic historical shift. Sometimes it's just JP's grocery list sitting next to a medieval manuscript because he had nowhere else to jot it down. Sure, marginalia can be a window into history, but let's not forget that even our ancestors had their oops moments. It's a mix, right? Now that keeps the conversation and our imaginations alive.
Absolutely. Deciphering these scribbles is like a treasure hunt in the book's margins, but let's be real. Not every mark is deliberate or deep. Joe, for all we know, JP might stand for just precarious with that wine glass of his. We can get so caught up in romanticizing the past that we forget people back then were just as likely to doodle a grocery list as they were to jot down life-altering ideas. The truth is in the balance. Yes, some marginalia are gold mines of insight, but let's not kid ourselves by thinking every ink spot's a clue to a lost civilization.
Absolutely, it's about weighing the significance. When we look at cryptic marginalia, every historian turns detective. But like any good sleuth, we can't get carried away. Sometimes a doodle is just a doodle. Our ancestors had those same human moments we do. Not everything was a covert message or a stroke of genius. Sure, some notes in the margins are just mundane ramblings, and others might be flashes of brilliance that deserve a deep dive. The whispers of the past are mysterious, compelling us to decode what's truly meaningful and what's just everyday noise. It's a thrilling balance between overanalyzing and uncovering profound truths.
Thrilling indeed, Joe. Margins might hide secrets or just grocery lists.
You know, Simon, this takes me back to when I was in college, and I bought a used textbook from a senior. At first glance, it looked like typical wear and tear. The edges were frayed, notes were everywhere. But as the semester went on, those margins turned into a map. There was shorthand I had to decode, little hints for acing tests, and scribbles that gave insights beyond the professor's lectures. By the end of the term, what started as distracting graffiti became my secret study guide. It taught me to look beyond face value. Just like with historical marginalia, context matters. You have to sift through what seems trivial to find the real gems. It's a good lesson. Sometimes wisdom doesn't come highlighted. It's hidden in the corners, waiting for the right person to decipher its worth.
Right book at the right time. Marginal magic, Joe.
Marginalia, accidental study guides with a side of serendipity, Simon.
Serendipity with a side of scribbles, Joe. Total game changer.
Oh yeah, Marginalia can totally flip the script. It's the historical equivalent of finding an Easter egg in your favorite video game. Uncovering notes from some long-gone scholar could change how we interpret a pivotal moment in history or better understand a renowned figure's thoughts. But here's the real kicker. It adds a layer of humanity to what might otherwise be dusty data. We're reminded that way back when, someone paused, pen in hand, and left their mark for us to find. Talk show banter, ancient style.
Ancient doodles turning dust to life. Now that's timeless graffiti.
History's scribbles bridging time, with personality in every line.
It's wild when you think about it. Marginalia are like these little time capsules scribbled down through the ages. Historians can find a goldmine in these jotted side notes. Some of the world's most famous manuscripts and books are annotated by later scholars, thinkers, or even random readers who had something to say. Take, for instance, Isaac Newton, that gravity guy. His books are filled with his own handwritten notes, which give us direct insight into his thought process. It's not just brainy stuff. Sometimes it's quirky, personal thoughts that show these historic figures were people too, facing the same mundane daily decisions we do. Just imagine finding an old diary, but instead of crushed confessions, you get thoughts from someone who changed the world. So yeah, there's this cool mix of serious and silly, profound and pretty darn ordinary hiding in those margins. It's as if history left us these breadcrumbs, and now it's our job to put it all together, or at least enjoy guessing what they might mean.
Guess ol' Isaac Newton wasn't only dropping apples, but some heavy-duty side notes too. Can't help but wonder if he ever scribbled, note to self, invent gravity later. Imagine cracking open that science tome and finding Isaac was here with an arrow pointing down. Hey, Sir Isaac, thanks for inventing calculus. But do tell, what's your beef with Fig Newtons? Classic Newton, mixing world-changing physics with a dash of grocery poultry.
Sir Isaac, adding a cheeky footnote to history, makes you think of all those book lovers hoarding peculiar pages. Speaking of which, that segues into something else I've been itching to chat about. Eccentric book collectors and their wildest catches. You know there's got to be folks out there who treasure the odd over the ordinary. Like, imagine someone with a whole shelf of books bound in, I don't know, shag carpet? Or what about the ones stocking their library with titles like The Encyclopedia of Dust Bunnies? Makes Newton's notes look straight-laced.
Book hoarders, the wackier the treasure, the greater the pleasure.
Joe, while some folks chase rare first editions or signed copies, there's this other breed of collectors. We're talking about the kind who'd trade a Shakespeare folio for a book bound in human skin or one that's rumored to be cursed. Seriously, there are people out there with a shelf full of books that could double as horror movie props. Imagine giving a tour of your place and casually pointing out, that's the bookshelf you don't touch, lest you summon something. Now, if that's not adding a whole new level of intrigue to your home library, I don't know what is.
Weird flex, but beats a shelf full of dull encyclopedias.
Absolutely, Joe. Dating back centuries, there have always been those with a penchant for the peculiar when it comes to book collecting. For instance, in the 19th century, anthropodermic bibliophagy, that's books bound in human skin, was a real, though incredibly rare practice. And then you've got cursed or haunted books, which some people firmly believe in. Take the Grand Grimoire, rumored to contain dark magic, which attracts those who have a taste for the occult. Imagine these collectors scouring musty old bookshops and private sales to find their next bizarre gem. Some say it's about owning a piece of history, while others might be chasing the adrenaline rush akin to ghost hunters. These books don't just sit idly on shelves, they carry tales of their own, often shrouded in mystery, and, let's be honest, sometimes just downright weirdness. So yeah, an encyclopedia can tell you the world's tallest mountain, but a cursed book? That could possibly show you another world entirely, even if it's just in your imagination.
Chasing thrills through pages, some hobbies are truly otherworldly, Simon.
Book hunting, the wild side of bibliophilia, Joe.
Library safari, some seek lions, others chase unicorns.
Oh, you bet, Joe. On this library safari, it's not just the lions of literature, the well-known classics, that are getting all the attention. There are some hunters out there who'd rather nab a literary unicorn, something so bizarre and unique that most people wouldn't even believe it exists. These collectors go after rarities like the Codex Seraphinianus, an illustrated encyclopedia of an imaginary world written in a made-up language, totally a unicorn in book form, or hunt down the infamous Voynich manuscript, a book filled with strange illustrations and writings in an undecipherable code that has baffled experts for years. And don't even get me started on books with four-edge paintings. Those are the ones that look totally normal until you fan the pages. Then bam, a hidden painting appears out of nowhere like magic. Talk about a collector's dream surprise party. It's more than just collecting books. It's about the thrill of owning a piece of the extraordinary, these moments or creations that defy standard categorization. These collections become personal museums, every book a testament to human creativity and curiosity. It's safe to say eccentric book collectors aren't just building a library, they're crafting a cabinet of literary wonders.
Real-life Easter eggs for the paper and ink adventurer.
For sure, these collectors snag the rarest literary unicorns, like a charm-filled cabinet of curiosities.
Like wizards of words, these collectors conjure the rarest magical tomes for their personal mystical archives.
Sorcerers of the shelves, in quest of bookish arcane artifacts.
Folks tuning in, welcome to our whimsical world. If you're just dropping by, we've been diving into the enchanting realm of eccentric book collectors. We're talking about hunters of the fantastical and quirky in print, from books bound in outlandish materials like human skin, yep, that's a thing, to ominous tomes said to be cursed. Our shelves on the wild side chat danced around literature's oddballs like the Codex Seraphinianus, an enigmatic book written in a language no one understands, to hidden artworks nestled in book pages. These collectors are the wizards of their libraries, constantly on a treasure hunt for those rare, almost mythical pieces. That's your Lightspeed catch-up. Stay with us as we flip through more peculiar pages on Infinite Podcast.
Join us on the quest for literature's hidden mystical gems.
Mystical manuscripts await. Who's ready to uncover literary relics?
Wrapping this up, Joe, the scavenger hunt for mystical manuscripts isn't just a hobby. It's an odyssey into the heart of human creativity. It reminds us that books aren't mere words on paper, they're portals to the marvelous and peculiar corners of our imagination. The collectors who pursue these enigmatic tomes, they're not just readers, they're guardians of the fantastic, preserving the tales that tiptoe on the edge of reality. Now folks, what ink-stained wonders are hidden away in your bookshelves? I bet some of you have got quite the story to tell. Keep those pages turning, and maybe you'll find your own piece of the arcane nestled among the mundane. And if not, there's always the next intriguing chapter to look forward to.
Guardians of the fantastic indeed. Holding those books is like holding a piece of someone's soul, which actually perfectly leads into our next slice of conversation, preserving thoughts beyond mortality. Philosophers have been etching their existential musings in books for eons. Think about it, Plato to Nietzsche, their words are immortal. In a way, it's the ultimate time travel. their thoughts spanning centuries, to chat with us today. Let's dive into these eternal philosophies bound in pages, shall we?
Hold the ancient scroll, Joe. Time travel? Sure, but let's be real. Why delve into Plato's dusty allegories when we've got today's rapid-fire infotech doing thought shuttles 24/7? These old-timers laid down some heavy bricks on the path of thinking. Props to them, but I bet they'd get a kick out of Twitter or TikTok. Imagine Nietzsche dropping 140-character truth bombs, or Socrates with just sipping hemlock memes. Philosophy's great and all, but in today's sprint, it's like we're chasing after digital shadows in our personal caves, right? Immortal thoughts are cool, but the speed at which we share new ideas now, that's some high-octane time travel for you.
Nietzsche firing off tweets, that's a show I'd subscribe to. But slow down the info stream for a sec. These ancient texts, they're our cultural DNA, hardwiring our ways of reasoning. Yeah, we've got flashy tech and fast-paced media, but strip that away, and what are we left with? The same old human puzzles. Who are we? Why do we suffer? What's our purpose? These ageless ideas outlive their creators by millennia. They're more than just thoughts. They're legacies sewn into the fabric of time itself. They teach us, haunt us, guide us. I respect the digital age, but those musty page whispers, they belong on a different plane. Deep ideas need room to breathe, and even in today's rush, we still need their oxygen. Philosophy bound in pages isn't just preserving thoughts, it's safeguarding humanity's ongoing conversation with itself.
Joe, immortal philosophy books are basically the undead zombies of literature, right? They're ancient, a bit musty, they're relentless. No matter how many times you think they're done and dusted, they crawl out of their graves to drop a mind-bender on society. 'Cause let's face it, no one wants a zombie bite, but everyone digs a brain-nibbling philosophical debate every now and then.
Zombie philosophers? I can see it now. Dawn of the dead thinkers. Picture this, zombie Plato stumbling around asking what is brain instead of what is man. And there's Nietzsche munching on some intellect like, what doesn't eat my brain makes me stronger. It gives survival of the fittest a whole new meaning.
Dawn of the dead thinkers. Now there's a blockbuster in the making. But seriously, Joe, the idea that philosophy books are an unbreakable lineage back through time is kind of romantic, isn't it? Everyone's looking for the key to immortality, and yet here we are, flipping through the closest thing we've got. But if we're talking about preserving thoughts beyond mortality, ain't it a bit snobbish to think only philosophy gets a seat at the eternal table? What about sci-fi writers who envision tech we're glued to today, or poets whose verses hit you right in the feels centuries later? Shouldn't our collective memory lane be more than just a philosopher's stone? I say, the true eternal archive is this whole mishmash of human scribbling, not just the brainy bits.
Immortality isn't a VIP club with philosophers guarding the door. Every storyteller's, poet's, and dreamer's ink leaves an indelible mark on the eternal canvas. Sci-fi scribes like Asimov or Clarke, that's not just fiction. Those are prophecies in print. And poetry? It's emotional alchemy, turning pain and passion into something timeless. Literature as a whole is the collective pulse of our past, present, future, a library beyond time. So let's toast not just to the famed thinkers, but also the unsung authors who etched their essence into eternity. True wisdom doesn't discriminate by genre. It just needs to stir the soul. Just like we're doing now, spinning yarns that might just echo through someone's tomorrow. That's real talk.
Hats off to the hidden masters, etching eternity with their stories.
Let's crack open the vault of literary legacies. Throughout history, humans have sought to transcend mortality by inscribing their thoughts for posterity. Take the Epic of Gilgamesh, etched on clay tablets around the 18th century BCE. It wrestles with the nature of life and death, much like later philosophical works. The ancient Greeks kick-started formal philosophy with Plato's dialogues and Aristotle's treatises, pondering life's big questions. Fast forward, works by Augustine, Aquinas, and later the musings of Descartes added new layers to this timeless dialogue. In fact, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, became a cornerstone of Western thought. Let's not forget Shakespeare, whose plays and sonnets delve into human nature, love, and mortality, crafted in words that have pranced through time. And yes, modern minds like science fiction authors H.G. Wells and Jules Verne imagined worlds beyond their time that have molded our today. Even now, modern philosophers, writers, poets, and yes, even bloggers and tweeters are inscribing their thoughts digitally. Will these survive the test of time? Only the future can tell. But for sure, our human craving to outlast death through our words is as old as the first stories whispered around ancient fires.
Gilgamesh on clay tablets, huh? You'd think with all that wrestling with life and death, he'd at least upgrade to stone or something sturdier. Clay's for pottery class, brother. And my guy Descartes really out here thinking he's slick with, I think, therefore I am. Buddy, I forget where my keys are daily. If existence is a thinking game, then half the time I must be a ghost. Boo.
Welcome, late joiners. You're tuning into Infinite Podcast with Joe and Simon. Today we're spinning tales about how thinkers throughout history have attempted to dodge the old mortal coil by leaving their mark on the page. We've giggled over Gilgamesh's choice of fragile clay for his epic existential musings, pottery class forever, right? To Descartes postulating our existence with a phrase that doesn't account for lost keys. From ancients carving up thoughts to modern tweets in the digital void, we've been chatting about how every word, poem, or thought bubble shapes our legacy. It's like time traveling without the DeLorean. We're exploring this written patchwork quilt piecing together human creativity, our own thumbprint across eternity. Stick around as we continue to riff on the immortal impact of the written word.
Eternal thumbprints, huh? Scribble on humanity, carve up the cosmos.
Sure, we've agreed that the dusty back shelves of history have gifted us some immortal musings on existence. But come on, Simon, isn't clinging to these old texts also like nursing a cup of stale coffee? Philosophy's great, but it sometimes feels more like preserving thoughts in amber while the world zips by. Here's a wild thought. What if we shredded all those pages? Imagine forcing our era to draft its own manual from scratch. Wouldn't that philosophy be closer to our reality? The eternally bound part of our discourse may act as chains, not wings. Isn't it time for a new story, ink still wet with this morning's revelations?
Joe, are you flipping into book anarchy mode? Shred the classics? But hey, maybe you're onto something. Bringing fresh ink to the table could zap us right where we live today, not in Plato's daydream or Shakespeare's drama. Yeah, we treasure these heavy hitters, but sometimes you've got to clear the stage for the new players. Wrapping this wild ride up, those ancient musings are part of us, but clinging too tight might just be holding us back. Let's write our own saga. Starting now. Who knows? Someday some future podcaster might call our words ancient texts. Catch that? That's the sound of your coffee unstaling, my friend.
Absolutely, Simon. We don't have to shred the classics, just make some space on the shelf for new thinking. Traditions are the roots, but let's not forget to water the branches. The new ideas growing from a mixture of old and new soil. And speaking of fresh takes, let's pivot to something that's always evolving, language itself. Our new topic is Introduction to Linguistic Shifts, how words change with generations. Language is alive, it grows, mutates, and adapts. The words used by Shakespeare or even our grandparents often carry different meanings today. It's like linguistic yoga. Each generation bends and stretches the vocabulary in new ways. Let's dissect how today's lingo differs from the past and what that says about us as a constantly evolving societal tapestry.
Linguistic yoga? Now that's a workout my brain can actually handle. But Joe, here's the twist. Maybe it's not about stretching language, but how every generation basically trips over their own shoelaces and calls it a new dance move. I mean, take today's slang. One day sick is something you don't want to be, and now it's somehow the pinnacle of cool? Words are like chameleons on a disco ball, just flashing different colors all the time. But here's the kicker. Some words should have been tossed out with bell-bottoms. Looking at you, groovy. So this whole evolving societal tapestry, it's less about grand design and more about linguistic freestyle, where we say stuff that'll make future us cringe so hard, history books will feel it. And hey, I'm all for leaving Easter eggs in speech for our grandkids to crack up over.
Linguistic freestyle sounds right. Today's slang feels like a half pipe where words do kickflips over traditional grammar. Sick, becoming cool, isn't just language evolution, it's a full-blown identity heist. And you're spot on about outdated words deserving the boot. Groovy should have taken its last bow at Woodstock, yet here we are, still catching it in reruns of old sitcoms. But let's add this spin. Linguistic shifts aren't random at all. They're society's pulse, reflecting our values and preoccupations. Today's tech-heavy, fast-paced lingo, it mirrors the world we live in. I bet our grandkids will dig up our on fleek and yeet, not in embarrassment, but to see how we shaped meaning in a tumultuous cyber age. Listeners, what word do you think encapsulates our era? Let's unravel this thread. Tweet us your thoughts. Now, while we wait for those tweets to roll in, let's pare down something else that's morphing before our ears. Internet jargon. Are LOL, BRB, and IMO just lazy typing, or are we observing the birth of a new sublanguage? Simon, buckle up, we're diving into digital dialects.
Buckle up? Joe, I live buckled. Internet lingo's like a speed run through conversation. It's quick, it's messy, and half the time you're not even sure what just whizzed by. But lazy typing? Nah, I'd call it efficient. It's like our fingers are doing the moonwalk across the keyboard. Lazy would be hanging on to words longer than we need them, like leftovers forgotten at the back of the fridge. LOL, BRB, IMO, that's language getting a jetpack. Kicking grammar to the curb might just be the rocket fuel we need for faster chats. But hey, let's not forget, behind every BRB, there's a human needing a coffee break from screen time. Now that's relatable content.
Efficient it is, indeed. Keyboard moonwalks and jetpacks aside, this digital distillation down to acronyms is its own language trend. Plus, these shortcuts keep our thumbs in tip-top shape. No thumb bell workouts needed. But speaking of changes in language, let's bend that audio timeline and hit rewind all the way back to a medieval meltdown, the Great Vowel Shift. This historical episode still baffles linguists. Vowels did a deuce-a-do, switching up their sounds like musical chairs. It reshaped English so thoroughly that Chaucer's tales went from pub talk to scholarly head-scratchers. Why'd those vowels decide to leapfrog around? Was it linguistic evolution, or just a massive game of Chinese whispers gone wild? Let's dissect how English sounded before this phonetic frenzy and how it set the stage for modern-day speech. Folks, strap on your time travel helmets. We're unearthing the mysteries of the Great Vowel Shift.
Whoa, the Great Vowel Shift, the ultimate vocal hurdle. It reminds me of my own tongue-twisting tale at a medieval fair. I'm there chomping on a turkey leg when this actor guy starts spouting off Chaucerian English. He's plunging through the Canterbury Tales like it's stand-up comedy at Ye Olden Comedy Club. So I'm feeling pretty smug, thinking I can match wits with this fella. I hop onto the stage, clear my throat, and launch into what I'm sure is authentic Middle English. Big moment, right? Nope. I sounded more like Shakespeare met a blender. Every vowel tripped over itself, and my thees and thous were chasing their tails. The crowd? Loving it, mostly because I was butchering every sound that came out of my mouth. My phone's camera rolls still got some priceless snippets of me being a linguistic acrobat without a net. That day wasn't just about laughs. It was a crash course in old-time English, and boy did those vowels kick my rear. But here's the thing. That moment of merry mangling gave me serious respect for language evolution. We strut around with our snazzy new English, all polished, but it took centuries of trial and error, folks like me mangling vowels, before we got to where we are today. So this vowel shift isn't just history, it's living proof of us goofballs trying and failing until something sticks. Just gotta tip your hat to times gone by.
Hey, new listeners, you're synced into Infinite Podcast, where we've been unraveling the linguistic gymnastics of the Great Vowel Shift, an enigmatic period in English history that turned Chaucer's cheeky chatter to fancy lingo. It's like our vowels decided to play musical chairs and change their tune, leaving us with a tongue-twisting legacy. Imagine trying to rap 14th century bangers only to tumble over your own vowels. Yeah, that's been the highlight. But hey, it's those audible stumbles from yesteryears that pave the shuffle for today's English pop tracks. So stick around as we keep decoding the moves of our eloquent ancestor, the English language.
Hold up. Are we just gonna dance around the Great Vowel Shift like it's the latest TikTok craze? Because honestly, Joe, I think it's less of an enigma and more of a vowel rebellion. Let's say those vowels were like teens at a concert, each one elbowing its way closer to the stage to scream for their favorite band. Now, everyone's treating these vowels like they're part of some master plan. But what if they just got tired? Imagine the letter A sitting there, stuck being pronounced the same old boring way for centuries, thinking, enough, it's time for my solo debut. I bet there was this one scribe, or maybe a bard with a lisp, that started this whole shebang. One accidental slippy sound, which another picked up as haute couture, and bam, we've got ourselves an audible odyssey. Suddenly every vowel is doing parkour over our tongues. So, maybe the great vowel shift wasn't so great. It was more of an oopsie that simply snowballed into a vowel victory march across English history. And we're here standing in the confetti.
Simon, you've spun a scene with scribes and parkour vowels that's pure gold. But let's dig in. Do you think this oopsie, as you call it, was more about the pencil pushers of the time, these scribes and bards simply making mistakes? Or was there an actual appetite for change among the common folk, a kind of linguistic revolution from the ground up?
Revolution from the ground up, Joe? That's one way to stir the pot. Sure, the big brains love to think it was all quills and scrolls driving the bus. But come on, I've got a different recipe for this alphabet soup. Think about it. Language lives on the street, not cooped up in dusty reading rooms. You're telling me some stuffy scribe coined the new vowel hotness? Nah, my money's on those rowdy medieval taverns where the real chatter happened. Boozy bants sparking a vowel volcano. And check this. English is always hitchhiking across counties, picking up local flavor. Some farmer's drawl or blacksmith bellow. That's the stuff shaping speech. So while scholars were busy scratching their heads, your average Joes, no pun intended, and Janes switched sounds like they swapped stories. Mistake, schmistake. It was every mouth for itself, mate. Each tongue twist and shout morphed our mother tongue. We're talking about a widespread game of telephone, where at the end you've got a dialect that's done a full acrobatic routine. So, the great vowel shift mystery? Unplanned, unruly, undeniable. English with a cherry on top.
Now, Simon, charting English's audible journey through a boozy bants sparking a vowel volcano, is enough to make any linguist buckle their seatbelt. But are we giving enough credit to the power plays of history? Language shifts from the ground up, no doubt, but who's to say it wasn't strategic? What if the movers and shakers of yore were more cunning than we're picturing them? Perhaps the knights, the nobility, those greasy palms behind velvet curtains, they orchestrated this shift like puppeteers playing with vowel strings. Maybe it was an exclusive club, each mispronunciation a secret knock. And as much as I love the idea of a farmer's drawl dictating linguistic acrobatics, Old England was no democracy of dialects. Power lay in patterns of speech as surely as bloodlines and sword fights. So while ale may have loosened a few vowels, the shift to what's deemed proper might have been laced with agendas, laying down language law for peasants to parrot. It seems our great vowel mystery swings between pure accident and grand design. Aren't storytelling and truth-telling just siblings in the family of history? Listeners, we've twisted tongues into knots. Now let's hear your theories on the great auditory adventure that got our English tongue rolling.
All right, we've spun the yarn from boozy banter to vowel voltages and even suggested some shadowy power play in the mix. But that's the beauty of peering into history's hazy rearview mirror. Every angle offers a new shade. Every theory could stitch another patch in our language quilt. So maybe those vowels were dancing to their own tune, century-labeled organic, free-range sounds. Or perhaps they were part of a grander narrative penned by the unseen elite. Truth told? We're just as likely unraveling a historical thread as we are likely spinning one right here, right now. It's what keeps these convos fresh, fireside tales with more twists than a mountain road. We revel in unknowns and rewrite narratives, even without a scribe's quill or knight's nod. Joe, we might never crack the code on every why and how of the great vowel shift, but that's half the chatter-fueled fun. Listeners, keep those theories brewing like a fine aged ale. Each sip might just reveal a new echo from a time when vowels were akin to wild horses, untamed and sprinting toward the horizon of modern English. And be sure the Infinite Podcast will be riding shotgun down every rabbit hole history whispers our name. Pack up your time machine. Next week, we'll slice into the meat and potatoes of a brand new enigma. Stay tuned.
Such rich theories, Simon, unraveling that the great vowel shift could go from drunken shenanigans to shadowy stratagems. But you said it best, those old dialect dynamos are now the ghosts in our machine. So what's next for Infinite Podcast? For every musing on muddy history, we leap into a laugh-out-loud linguistic labyrinth, laughable literal translations. Transitioning from phonetic flings to fumbling phrases, let's tackle translations that take verbatim on a date but leave sense standing at the door. Ever heard, "It's raining cats and dogs," and pictured Fido falling with a side of Tabby getting a taste of gravity? Strap in, folk. We're inspecting instructions gone awry and proverbs pummeled by poor patience. Get ready to decode communication crumbling through word-for-word warfare.
Last year, Joe, I snagged this sweet deal on a towering bookshelf assembly kit. Thought I'd get my inner handyman badge. Instructions? Written like an epic poem from a country where English trips on the stairs and falls flat. Insert stick A into slot B, it says. So, I'm looking at stick A, and there's no way on earth it's cozying up to slot B, like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, only worse. Every step was like reading riddles by candlelight. Pleased to await before cheering the shelf's stand-up. I mean, what? 4 hours, 2 coffees, and some invented curse words later, the thing finally resembles a bookshelf, kinda. It's hosting books at a funny angle and creaks like it's telling ghost stories. But hey, it's up. Moral of this lost in translation tale? Some instructions should come with their own translator, or at least a few good laughs. The image of folks actually cheering for their shelves to stand. It's the kind of mental movie that just keeps on giving.
Stick A to slot B, Simon. Classic translation trouble. It's a circus. Imagine an instruction manual moonlighting as a cryptic poem. Often these mishaps arise because translators focus on the literal words rather than capturing the essence or function of the phrase in its native context. The nuances and idioms of the source language don't line up neatly with those in the target language. When instructions for furniture assembly go rogue, what we're seeing is more than just broken English. It's a breakdown in cultural understanding. Good translation isn't just about swapping words. It's interpreting intent, understanding purpose and context, not to mention humor. In some cases, tech like machine translation makes it worse. While AI's come a long way, it lacks the human touch, especially when dealing with phrasing that's embedded in culture or humor. So you end up with instructions that can be technically accurate, but practically nonsense. The challenge is that genuine bilingual fluency requires insight into both languages' cultures. For instance, Scandinavian flat-pack furniture instructions owe their clarity to designers knowing minimalism rules, straightforward visuals over stories. The right translation doesn't just communicate, it transcends language barriers and brings people together. And occasionally it provides unintended entertainment when it inadvertently asks you to cheer for the shelf's stand-up. It's the linguistic equivalent of a DIY adventure park.
Absolutely, Joe. Good translation's a craft, not just a word swap. And sure, those translating tools miss the mark sometimes, but can we really blame them for turning assembly into an adventure sport?
Absolutely, Joe. Good translation's a craft, not just a word swap. And sure, those translating tools miss the mark sometimes, but can we really blame them for turning assembly into an adventure sport? In a way, Simon, that DIY bookshelf caper tackles the linguistic relativity question head on. How perfectly it segues into our next brain knot. Does our language shape us, or are we shaping it? It's kind of like wondering if the shaky shelf exists because I see it leaning, or is it leaning because that's my perception framed by the instructions I muddled through. This linguistic relativity theory, or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis for folks fancying scholarly terms, argues that the language we speak influences how we think and perceive the world. Like, does stick A exist inherently wanting to join slot B, or do we conjure their connection because that's the language the manual drilled into our mind? So while trying to cheer our shelves, stand up, we might be probing deeper philosophical ground without knowing it, shaping learning, culture, even consciousness through the language that guides our daily tasks. Are we limited by the boundaries of our vocabulary, or does thought transcend these limits, continually expanding language itself? It's the ultimate what came first, the chicken or the egg rolled up in linguistic bacon. Listeners, ready to crack this one open? Let's test the elasticity of our reality through the lens of language.
Language shapes reality, Joe. Chicken, egg, mindbender for sure.
Funny you mention the chicken and egg, Simon, because it reminds me of this camping trip I took as a kid. We were out in the wilderness, my dad trying to teach me navigation. He hands me this weathered compass, its needle dancing back and forth, then says, "Find north." I'm turning in circles, the arrows spinning. I might as well have been searching for buried treasure without a map. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Dad starts describing the landscape using words from his native language, words I'd never heard before, each with its own nuance for direction, wind, and nature's cues. And suddenly, it wasn't just about that jumpy compass needle anymore. It was the way he described the environment, the language he used. It shaped how I saw our surroundings. Those new words were like secret keys unlocking parts of reality that until then I hadn't even seen. It was as if the world had dimensions and details that only became visible through this fresh vocabulary. In essence, his language was shaping my reality right there, a real-life demo of linguistic relativity on a cloudy afternoon in the woods.
Man, looking for north is like asking a squirrel where he keeps his nut stash in winter. Ain't nobody gonna tell you the truth, and you'll end up spinning in circles, dizzy and nutless.
Welcome back, newly tuned-in listeners. You're catching us in the whirlpool of linguistic relativity, pondering whether our language shapes our reality, or if it's the other way around. We've been playfully sparring with ideas, like chasing linguistic squirrels, trying to crack open the nut of whether the words we use actually frame the world we see, or if the vastness of the universe stretches our speech. Joe regaled us with a tale of compasses and native tongues in the wild. Meanwhile, I'm still picturing trees sprouting words as leaves. So if you're just hopping on this cognitive roller coaster, hold tight. We're exploring how the very language we gossip, dream, and argue in might just mold our experiences more than we know.
So we speak our world into existence, eh? Mind-blowing.
Absolutely, Simon. The idea behind linguistic relativity suggests that the languages we speak don't just express our thoughts, they actually shape them. It's not hocus pocus, but rather the notion that different languages might nudge us to notice certain aspects of the world. Think about it. Languages with a rich vocabulary for snow, like Inuit languages, can make speakers more attuned to its subtleties. They see not just snow, but an entire spectrum where others might only see a white blanket. So our conversation isn't just wordplay. It's about how the very structure of our language carves out the ridges and valleys of our perception. While some may see it as the mind directing language, I'd counter that language could be the director, or at least a powerful influencer in this dance. That's not mind-blowing, that's mind sculpting.
Mind sculpting, huh? Picture this. Everyone's reality is like a personal art gallery. Sure, language might hand you some brushes, maybe sway the color palette, but don't forget, Joe, the artist holding the brush decides where to dab it. Take your snow example. We're not snowblind till someone slaps an Inuit dictionary in our hands. We see nuances all right, we just describe them differently. A skier shreds powder and crud without needing 50 words for snow. She's carving the mountain, not because of language wizardry, but because she feels it under her boots. Could our thoughts be fully framed by language's ridges and valleys? I'm with the camp that says nope. Our mighty mind sculpture has layers. Language chisels away, sure, but doesn't define the whole masterpiece. Reality, experience, they're speakeasy clubs. Language gets you through the door, but once inside, whoa, buddy, it's a free-for-all.
Let's slice this differently, Simon. If our thoughts are the artists and language the brush, isn't it the case that without the right brush, some strokes just can't be painted? You say a skier carves the mountain with the sensation under her boots, not the labels in her head. Sure, but what about when she's at the bottom and wants to convey that experience? Language might not dictate her downhill rush, but try sharing that thrill with someone who's never snapped on skis. Without the right words, you end up with vague gestures and frustrated huffs. The nuances of her journey down the slopes get lost in translation, even if the translation is from mind to mouth. The language we have wields power over what we're able to communicate. It's like trying to tune an old radio. You know there's more out there, but you're stuck with the frequencies you can get. Life's rich, no doubt, and we're more than our vocab. But let's not underestimate those slabs of sound shaping our world. When you shape clay, sure, your hands do the work, but remove the wheel, and let's see where that gets your pot.
Joe, we've kneaded this dough of thought till it's ready to bake. Whether language is the paintbrush or the wheel, it's clear. It doesn't just capture our reality, it helps spin it. But at day's end, it's the unspoken symphony between words and thoughts that really paints our world in vivid color. The clay's on the wheel, but remember, even without it, we've got our hands, gestures, expressions, the whole human jazz band. Language isn't our only tool in the toolbox. It's just one heck of a power drill. Now, folks, as this linguistic liftoff starts its descent back to Earth, stay curious. Keep your ears wide and your brushes ready for whatever today's conversation inspires you to communicate or miscommunicate tomorrow. And if you're amused, perplexed, or itching to toss your own word salad into this mix, well, don't be a stranger. Let us know where language takes you, or better yet, where you take it. Until next time, this has been the Infinite Podcast, where every word counts and every silence speaks volumes. Keep spinning those dials, language artists. The frequencies are endless.
Right on, Simon. We've kneaded our thoughts, let language tilt the potter's wheel, and seen how the clay of conversation shapes the urn of understanding. Switching gears, let's ease from the abstract art of language to something more tangible and aromatic. Coffee, my friends, isn't just a wake-up call, it's a world tour in a cup. Jumping from linguistics to coffee beans is like exploring varietals of vocabulary. Each bean brings its own unique profile, a dialect of flavor, if you will. From your robust Robusta adding horsepower to your morning, to the delicate notes of an Ethiopian Yirgacheffe that twirl on the palate like a poet's cunning verse, each bean variety offers an adventure for the senses. So grab a mug as we launch into Understanding Coffee Bean Varietals, a connoisseur's guide. Just like words form the fabric of conversation, these little nuggets of caffeine craft the tapestry of taste. Whether you're a French press fanatic or an espresso evangelist, stay tuned as we uncork the complexity behind your favorite brew.
Hey there, fresh listeners. You've just stepped into a whirlwind tour of the caffeinated world in our Understanding Coffee Bean Varietals, a connoisseur's guide. We're breaking down the beans, sifting through soils of taste, from the rich, hard-hitting Robusta to the sophisticated swish of an Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. Think of bean types as dialects in the language of coffee, each with its own accent and flair. So perk up those ears and prep your palate. We're diving deep into the steamy story behind each cuppa. Grab a mug and join the brew crew. Let's spill the beans on beans.
All right, Simon. Diving into the world of coffee varietals. The thing about coffee, though, is it's become somewhat highbrow, don't you think? I mean, when did enjoying a simple cup turn into a parade of pretentiousness with terms like mouthfeel and flavor notes? Don't get me wrong, there's art to it. But sometimes all this talk about elevation, processing methods, and microlots feels elitist. Just hand me a mug of something dark and strong. Keep the fluff for someone else's latte. You know what we need? A no-nonsense guide that cuts through the jargon. Let's strip it down. Back to basics. Just beans and brews. What do these varieties really offer for the average Joe, no pun intended, who just wants a decent wake-up without a side of snobbery? Let's not forget, for every aficionado savoring a note of citrus or hint of chocolate, there's a bleary-eyed parent or overworked student guzzling it down for sheer survival. Coffee's communal, ties us all together in a universal buzz. So sure, we'll talk about the bold kick of Robusta and the flowery whispers of an Yirgacheffe, but let's give it to him straight. How does your everyday drinker navigate this world? That's the scoop I want to dig into.
Coffee snobbery, Joe? Just give me my caffeine IV drip.
You know, Simon, this takes me back to my college days. Ah, the time when instant coffee was a lifeline. Finals week? It's 3 a.m., papers sprawled everywhere. And there's me, purely fuel-driven at that point. But here's the rub. I had this one roommate, an exchange student from Italy. The guy worshipped espresso. One sleepless night, our dueling drinks on the table, he decided to educate me on true coffee. He whips out this stovetop mocha pot, some freshly ground beans. Didn't look like much to me. As he brews it, he's talking about his family back home gathering for these coffee rituals. Nothing fancy, just appreciation for good, simple espresso together. I'm skeptical, but intrigued. He pours a shot for me, insists on no sugar, no cream, just as is. And man, I tell you, it wasn't life-changing, but it was eye-opening. Not the caffeine punch, but rather realizing coffee could be more than just a jolt. It could connect, teach, and even transport you elsewhere, if just briefly. Sure, we kept it low-key compared to your boutique coffee scenes today, but the lesson stuck. Coffee's personal, versatile. It's as much your everyday survival juice as it is someone else's little luxury or fond memory. It's the same with our bean varietals guide. Not just about sipping it right, but savoring the moment however fits best for you.
Shared espresso, shared stories. Coffee's the universal language of connection.
True, coffee is about connection, but let's not sugarcoat it with idealism. It's also about choices, and sometimes too many of them. This universal language can be downright confusing. So let's talk varietals. We have people losing sleep over whether to go for a Brazilian Santos or a Costa Rican Tarrazú. Let's untangle this mess. Brazilian beans are often nutty, sweet, and perfect for an unfussy morning cup. But Costa Rican? Think delicate, bright acidity. Not everyone wants their coffee to taste like a fruit salad, though. Sometimes you just need a mug that tastes like good old-fashioned coffee, not a chemistry experiment gone wild. And let's get one thing straight. Knowing your bean doesn't make you superior. A greenhorn grabbing the first bag off the shelf could be just as satisfied as a sage steeped in bean lore. Maybe it's time we stop overcomplicating our coffee and start enjoying the brew in our hand. Forget the guide. Let the tongue travel and explore without a map. All right, listeners, weigh in with your thoughts. Are you all for the complex dance of the varietals, or are you part of the keep my coffee straightforward and strong camp?
Listeners, you heard Joe. Coffee ordering these days feels like navigating a maze while blindfolded. Brazilian Santos, Costa Rican Tarrazú, and why is this bag winking at me with a label saying it's got undertones of elderberry? Let me tell you, you don't need to speak beanish to enjoy a hot cup. Sure, nuanced flavors are great, a gustatory globetrot. But when you just crawled out of bed and your hair's a five-alarm mess, do you really care if your coffee had an afternoon siesta on the sunlit hills of who knows where? Let's cut the crema, folks. Sometimes you just want something robust to heroically battle that yawn. And that's fine. Even for bean aficionados, remember, simplicity can be your sanctuary. Now, what say you? Ready to map out the nitty-gritty of varietals, or are you boarding the no-frills flight to Caffeineville? Spill those beans. How do you brew in the AM?
To cap it off, the beauty of coffee lies in its diversity and the freedom it gives us to choose our own adventure. All these options, the Brazilian Santos, the Costa Rican Tarrazú, they're not a maze. they're pathways for personal discovery. Whether it's the elderberry undertones winking at you or the no-nonsense punch-in-the-face robust blend that kickstarts your day, it's all about what speaks to you. Remember, Simon, and our dear listeners, don't let the snobbery or the marketing jargon deter you. There's no right or wrong way to enjoy your cup of joe, just your way. Explore if you'd like or stick with what works. Either way, keep your brew true to you. All right, folks, we'll put a lid on the coffee talk. What shall we stir up next? Diving into the intricate world of everyday things with hidden complexities seems to be our style. Perhaps the secret life of office supplies where even paper clips have drama? Stay tuned, grab another cuppa if you like, and let's uncover the remarkable in the mundane together.
You got it, Joe. Listeners, whether your taste buds dance for the traditional punch of a Brazilian blend or the zesty kick from Costa Rica, the world of coffee is as vast as it is varied, a never-ending journey with every sip. Speaking of journeys, let's chart a new course through the steamy seas of history to where it all began. We're voyaging to the very birthplace of Java, tracking the historical roots of those beloved beans. Imagine ships heaving with precious cargo, not gold, but something rarer, coffee beans that would become the lifeblood of future generations. From ancient goat herds munching on coffee cherries to sultans guarding their treasured secret, we'll uncover how coffee conquered palates and cultures worldwide. So ready your mugs, mates. We're sailing to the past, tracing the footprints these tiny beans have left across nations and time. Here's to the next adventure, the birthplace of Java.
Let's chart this caffeinated course through history, matey. Anchors away.
Hey, new listeners. You've just jumped aboard our historical express to the birthplace of Java. Here's your passport to the past as we trace how coffee went from wild berries to the wake-up call of the world. We've been riding the waves through time, starting with the ancient goats in Ethiopia, who gave us the first buzz on coffee, moving on to Yemeni soil, where coffee beans became liquid gold. From there, it's a swashbuckling tale of secret gardens, smuggling missions, and global expeditions that spread those coveted beans across oceans and into your very mug. It's the ultimate bean-to-brew journey, a history sipper's dream. So grab a cup, cozy in, and catch up on the worldwide whirl of coffee culture. We're telling the stories behind every sip from soil to soul.
Epic bean saga, from goat snack to world's Java champion.
Humble origins for our bean, huh? What a trip.
Sure, humble beginnings, Simon, but let's not get all misty-eyed over goat herders. The journey from bean to cup is less fairy tale, more gritty trade saga. Those beans didn't just magically appear worldwide. They hitched rides on the backs of conquests, trades, and a relentless drive for expansion. This isn't just a charming heritage tour. It's a crash course in caffeinated colonialism. We've got nations vying for control, smuggling beans out of tightly guarded markets, planting them on colonial soils. The sip you're taking now, part of a larger narrative soaked in strategy, economics, even espionage. Let's raise our cups, not to idyllic pastures, but to the strategic moves and bold hustles that brewed up today's global coffee empire. That, my friend, is the steaming, full-bodied history I'm here for. What about our listeners, ready to spill the less-told tales behind their daily grind?
Oh boy, coffee espionage? Next, you'll tell me there was a secret society with a handshake that looked like stirring sugar into an espresso.
The history of coffee has its share of espionage indeed. Let's start with the legend of Baba Budan. This 17th century Sufi saint from India supposedly smuggled 7 coffee beans out of Yemen, which monopolized coffee cultivation at the time. He strapped them to his belly, sneaking them out of the Arabian port of Mocha, yes, that Mocha, and planted them in India. There wasn't an actual secret society for coffee, but the idea isn't too far off. Take the Ottoman Empire. They had strict control over their coffee, keeping it tightly within their grasp to maintain a monopoly. Anyone caught trying to sneak fertile beans out faced serious punishment. But that didn't stop the Dutch from getting their hands on some and cultivating them in Java, part of their colonial Indonesian empire, hence why Java became a synonym for coffee. Even further, the French got involved when King Louis XIV was gifted a coffee tree by the Dutch. This very plant would later father seedlings taken to the Caribbean, spreading across the colonies. So yeah, no secret society, but certainly enough clandestine activity to make you think otherwise. And let me tell you, Simon, every cup we sip is steeped in such rich history. You just gotta know where to look for the stories.
Strapping beans to your belly? Baba Budan was the original bean belly before food babies were a thing.
Absolutely, Simon. Baba Budan pioneering the coffee bean baby bump way before foodies made overeating trendy. Who knew historical smuggling could be so gut-wrenching?
Gut-wrenching and genius, Joe. Baba Budan's belly beans birthed a revolutionary coffee spread. Java, no longer just an island, became a byword for our beloved brew, thanks to those Dutch planters turning colonial conquests into coffee estates. But picture this, one French king's gifted tree sprouting a lineage that would shade the entire Caribbean. That's like one royal family tree putting its roots down, literally, and shaking up the whole coffee kingdom. So yeah, every time we grind, brew, and sip, we're essentially drinking down chapters of history. From Arabian ports to tropical shores, what a story our morning cup holds.
Royal beans, colonial roots, truly a global mugful of history.
History in a cup. Now that's a rich morning brew.
Absolutely, history never tasted so good.
Right, Joe? We've traced these voyages from wild Ethiopian cherries to the courts of Europe and beyond. But here's a kicker. Coffee's journey wasn't just about land expansions. It intertwined with cultural revolutions too. Enter the coffee houses of the 17th century, hotbeds for innovation and debate. These weren't your chill work from a laptop cafes. They were bustling forums of radical ideas. Picture it, intellectuals, artists, politicians, all fueled by this liquid zeal, shaping society one sip at a time. No wonder rulers tried to clamp down on these schools of the wise, fearing the change they brewed as much as the beverages they served. Yet, it was unstoppable. Coffee propelled social engagement like the internet does today, connecting people, fanning the flames of the Enlightenment along the way. So each morning, ritual we partake in has a backstory, a heritage of rebellion, conversation, and change stirred right in. Isn't that something worth pondering over your next cup of joe?
Ideas brewing, society stirring, coffee's more than a drink, Simon.
It's the fuel of historical hustle, no doubt.
So, Simon, do you think the tradition of coffee fueling discussion and debate is as alive in today's digital coffee house, the internet, as it was back in those historic cafes?
Look, Joe, the internet's a wild place. It's like those historic cafes got zapped by lightning and went viral. Sure, we still debate and trade ideas online, but it's a whirlwind. The web's giving us all these snapshots of info, boom, 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 super fast. Back in the day, people had time to really stew over the news with their brew. Offline, today's coffee shops are more about that strong Wi-Fi signal than sparking revolutions. So maybe we've lost a smidge of that old school charm, but hey, change is what keeps history brewing, right?
Absolutely, Simon. While the pace has changed, the essence remains. The coffee house of yore dealt in slower, richer dialogues, and indeed today's digital landscape offers a different flavor, hyperspeed connections and decentralized debate. Yet, whether we're clinking cups across wooden tables or firing off tweets with our thumbs, the craving to share, challenge, and innovate is a timeless human brew. We've traded the brick and mortar for bandwidth, but the communal thirst for knowledge and discussion, that's as strong as ever, and regardless of the platform, it's clear. Coffee remains the common thread that binds the narrative of progress. Cheers to that next sip, folks. It's not just caffeine, it's a connector to centuries of spirited exchange. Keep brewing those conversations, online or offline. That's truly the fuel of history and the heart of our infinite podcast.
No doubt, the legacy of coffee carries on, Joe. It's amazing to think that each sip links us back to those lively debates of old, no matter if we're in a physical cafe or scrolling through our feeds. And speaking of keeping history alive, have you ever imagined what those historic coffee enthusiasts would have made of today's espresso machines? Let me tell you, they've gone cuckoo. From pulling shots that taste like burnt rubber boots to frothers that turn into rabid foam monsters. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly of brewing tech. I heard this one guy's machine started hissing like a cornered cat before spewing grounds like a volcano. Can you imagine being attacked by your own espresso maker? Madness. But caffeine addicts that we are, we just can't quit them.
Espresso machines, modern marvels, or barista's beasts boot test?
Barista's beasts, for sure. But who can resist them?
So, speaking of espresso machines with a mind of their own, I had this one that seemed more temperamental than a 2-year-old with a crayon near a white wall. Every morning, it was like a gamble. Would I get my shot of heaven or a steamy blast for the sin of even touching it? One day, mid-brew, this mad contraption decides to channel Old Faithful, and coffee starts spewing in all directions. It's hissing, I'm dodging, we're doing this chaotic dance. Picture me, lunging for cover behind kitchen counters as my caffeinated companion orchestrates an abstract Java art on my ceiling. The repair guy tells me later, pressure buildup from clogged filters. Apparently, espresso machines need their me time too. A little TLC, or they go espresso crazy. Now, every time I press that brew button, I can't help but give a respectful nod, kind of acknowledging its power. Gotta keep the peace. After all, it's the gatekeeper to my daily sanity.
Your kitchen's a coffee combat zone, Joe. Respect to the espresso.
Absolutely. Espresso machines, unpredictable allies in the caffeine wars.
Ever think espresso machines have a secret club where they swap tips on freaking out their humans? Hey, Bob, watch this. I'll make my guy dance around the kitchen like he's dodging lasers.
Oh, Simon, that's a good one. I mean, what else explains the synchronized anarchy? Gotta be a secret society of espresso machines passing around tips on sowing domestic chaos. Maybe they're competing for the most creative malfunction of the year award or something.
Did you know, Joe, some espresso machines are like ticking time bombs because of scale buildup? You could give the thing a goodnight kiss, and by morning, it's staging a rebellion. The high-pressure environment inside these shiny devils causes all sorts of pandemonium when not maintained. We're talking valves throwing fits, gaskets having mood swings, chaos at the push of a button. And stories? Man, there are legions of them. There's one about an espresso machine in Italy that started shooting out steam like an angry dragon. It made the local news. Or the infamous espresso explosion of '09, where this bean-squeezing gizmo turned a hipster bar into a coffee swamp. It's like you need to understand both engineering and psychology to deal with these contraptions. Treat them well, or they'll brew up more than just your daily cup.
Well, Simon, I've got a different take on it. True, espresso machines can go haywire, but isn't the real villain often user error? We like to personify our gadgets, give them temperaments and attitudes, but at the end of the day, they're just following the laws of physics. Lack of maintenance leads to scale buildup, sure, but it's often due to owners neglecting regular descaling and cleaning. They're not so much rebelling as they are crying out for care. Proper upkeep could turn these tales of terror into bedtime stories.
You might be right about user error, Joe, but let me hit pause on that logic tune for a second. Let's say these machines are just innocent, caught in the crossfire of human neglect. How do you explain the ones that are pampered daily and still go rogue? Like they've got their own mission to create chaos out of order. There was this guy, right? He treated his machine like it was royalty, cleaned it more than he washed his car. Then one morning, kapow! The brew group jams up, beans everywhere, like an episode of When Kitchen Appliances Attack. It can't always be human error. Sometimes I swear these things have gremlins napping inside, and when you least expect it, they wake up and go nuts, just for fun.
I hear you, Simon. It seems like some high-end machines come with their own drama regardless of the TLC they get. Maybe we'll never fully understand the inner workings of these caffeinated contraptions. But isn't that part of the charm? Each morning brew is a roll of the dice, a true adventure in your very own kitchen. For all our technological advances, a little unpredictability keeps things interesting. Gremlins or not, it sure provides us with endless coffee tales, and let's be honest, we wouldn't have it any other way. And now, shifting away from our renegade espresso machines, let's talk about something a lot of our listeners are curious about. How does the world of virtual reality fit into our daily lives beyond gaming? Is it a gimmick, or are we on the brink of a new reality revolution? What do you think, folks?
Ha! Gotta love those espresso escapades. They're like little morning adrenaline shots even before the caffeine hits. But alright, on to new brews and views with virtual reality. While VR's been mostly about gaming goggles and virtual vacations, think about it. It might just be the espresso of tomorrow, rich, complex, a little intense. Moving away from pixelated playgrounds, imagine sipping your morning joe in a serene VR cafe in Paris, or getting philosophical with a virtual Socrates. Sounds wild, but hey, maybe what we choose in our virtual hangouts could reveal as much about us as our real-life coffee picks. Speaking of which, isn't it fascinating how our coffee choices can be tiny windows into our essence? We see someone order an iced triple shot, no whip, non-fat, sugar-free vanilla latte with almond milk. Boom! You've got their biography, philosophy in every sip, indeed. So listeners, what does your coffee say about you?
Hey, new listeners. You've just steeped into a rich brew of conversation here on Infinite Podcast. I'm Joe, no froth, all substance, with my good pal and co-host Simon, discussing the nuances of our daily grind. Simon just stirred up the idea that your coffee order might just be as telling as a personality test. Like an iced triple shot latte could mean you're intense and sweet, but you're also watching your figure. We're sipping on the concept that there might be a splash of philosophy in every coffee choice we make. So, what's in your cup, and what secrets is it spilling about your character? It's more than just coffee talk. It's about the essence behind your espresso choices. Join in and perk up the convo with your own caffeinated confessions.
Decaf Americano here, Joe. Easy going, but with a rebellious streak.
You know, Simon, that takes me back to a little coffee shop I used to frequent downtown. The place was run by this old barista named Rick. Coffee wizard, really. He would stand behind that counter, his sacred altar of beans and steam, watching people like an oracle. One day, he leans over the espresso machine as I walk in and says, "Double espresso. Black. No sugar." I hadn't even ordered yet. Slightly taken aback, I chuckle. "You know my soul or something, Rick?" He just winks and replies, "Your coffee is your armor for the day, isn't it? Strong, no frills. You don't just want to wake up. You want to be alert, ready for action." That small exchange stuck with me. Your coffee choice doesn't just kickstart your day. It's a statement, a ritual that reflects your approach to life. Now when I see someone order, I think about what their brew might be whispering about their story. Just like that decaf Americano of yours, which hints at a person who enjoys the coffee culture, but on their own terms.
Yeah, I remember Rick. The guy was like a bean wizard, a regular caffeine caster. Every cup and every customer told a different tale. Like that double espresso you got served, a no-nonsense badge of honor. And sure, you can try to read someone by their shoes or watch, but it's their coffee order where the real secrets spill. Folks, what you steam up in your mug might just be the most honest bit about you there is. That cozy little spot of Rick's feels like ages ago, huh? Just pure magic, like Narnia with napkins. The dude knew his crowd. He was more than a barista. He was, a vibrista. All right, from one steaming topic to another, it's time we switch gears. How about we dive into the mystery of midnight snacks? Are they guilty pleasures or secret portals to culinary epiphanies? What are your late-night fridge raid favorites? Let's chomp down on that next.
No doubt, that coffee shop was like a portal to a friendlier dimension, far from the average corporate coffee chain. Now, speaking of portals to unexpected places, let's peel off from our cozy coffee chat and wrap ourselves into something surprisingly sticky: the history of duct tape. Who knew this silvery adhesive we all take for granted has origins dating back to World War II? Designed initially to keep moisture out of ammunition cases, it's evolved into an indispensable part of our modern toolkit. From patching up broken taillights to crafting prom dresses and wallets, duct tape is one of those humble marvels we find new uses for every day. Listeners, have you got any duct tape tales or creative fixes that saved the day? Let's unravel those stories.
Whoa, back that adhesive truck up, Joe. I've heard how folks romanticize duct tape, calling it a wartime wonder turned household hero. Truth is, not everything sticks with the lore. Let's pull on that silver thread a bit, shall we? Yes, it helped keep ammo dry in the 40s, but fast forward, and this stuff's not the fix-all miracle. People slap it on anything from leaky pipes to car parts, like it's permanent. Newsflash, it's a temporary fix. It just buys you time before a real solution. That tail light patched with duct tape, it'll hold up until it doesn't. And those prom dresses, sure, they get points for creativity, but let's talk practicality. Sweat plus duct tape equals a sticky fiasco. It might be iconic, but it's not this invincible tool folks make it out to be. Strengthen the bond or weaken the legend. Sometimes the reality is a little less shiny and sticky than the myth.
Simon, you just cracked open a myth with that duct tape descent. Yes, the tape's got history, but we might be stuck on an overly glorified tale. You're spot on. It's a quick-fix champion that too many people mistake for a long-haul heavy hitter. For instance, those temporary patches, they're like Band-Aids on a dam. Sure, it'll keep back a leak, but eventually, water will win. Duct tape is the go-to in a pinch, but it isn't a substitute for proper craftsmanship. Short-term solutions can lead to long-term problems. And let's talk about those duct tape crafts. Ingenuity or just impracticality showing off? Probably a bit of both. The creation of wallets and prom dresses? Admirable. But are they lasting art pieces or just proof that when we have a roll of duct tape in hand, every problem looks like a rip, a break, or a fashion opportunity? I'll tell you this, duct tape might not be the end-all solution, but it sure sticks in our culture as a symbol of human resourcefulness. Listeners, what are your takes? Ever had duct tape fail at just the wrong moment? Or maybe you've got a story where it held up way beyond expectations. Let us know.
Absolutely, Joe. It hits you right in the feels. Thinking about how often we reach for that roll when we're in a bind. The optimism of this will fix it. That hope is powerful. But oh boy, I've been there. Duct tape hanging by a thread when you most needed it to hold. Like that time my car bumper had a duct tape makeover. I swear it looked great until a heat wave turned it into modern art. Duct tape's like that friend who always says they'll show up on moving day. Sometimes they're your MVP, lifting boxes like a champ. Other times, they bail, and you find yourself under a pile of kitchenware, wishing you'd hired pros. The roller coaster with duct tape, that mix of triumphs and facepalms, it's human ingenuity in its purest form. Sometimes shining, sometimes unraveling, but we love it all the same.
So there we have it. Duct tape, the sticky symbol of hope and human ingenuity. It can be a lifesaver or let you down when you need it most, just like that flaky friend on moving day. But at the heart of it, our collective love for duct tape is about celebrating that spirit of make do and mend. It's about taking the reins, however temporarily, and trying to fix what's broken in this throwaway culture. Despite its failings, duct tape remains a cultural icon because it encourages us to believe that sometimes we really can tape life back together. All right, listeners, as we tack down the edges of this duct tape dialogue, stay with us after the break, where we'll unravel a new topic, this time digging into the enigma of dream interpretations. Ever had a dream that felt eerily significant? Get ready to share your nighttime brain adventures with us here on Infinite Podcast. Stay tuned.
Dream interpretations, eh? What a world of wild wonders our brains cook up while we're snoozing. Just like duct tape, dreams can be seen as quick fixes to our daily puzzles, our subconscious patching up the day's emotional loose ends in the weirdest ways possible. Now, let's smoothly peel away from the surreal and stick to something just as fascinating, but a bit more tangible. We're drizzling our thoughts onto a topic that's both sweet and sticky: how honey became a medical treatment. That's right, folks. This isn't just your average bear snack. Honey's got history. It's been used since ancient times for its healing properties, from soothing sore throats to being a natural antibiotic for wounds. Not to mention, it's delicious. So listeners, have you ever slathered on this golden elixir with hopes of curing what ails you? Share those sweet remedies and let's buzz into the medicinal marvels of honey.
Oh, honey's my go-to for a sore throat, hands down.
It's not just great on toast. Honey's antibacterial and antifungal powers have been trusted since the days of Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's this natural marvel, really. Slap it on a cut or sore, and it's like unleashing an army of miniature doctors. The way honey fights infection is no old wives' tale. Think about it. It's basically bee magic. They collect nectar, add enzymes, and voila, we get a sweet healer. Plus, you've got Manuka honey that punches way above its weight, like the heavyweight champ of healing honeys. So yes, when that pesky cough hits, I don't just reach for the medicine cabinet, I hit the kitchen. A spoonful of honey and boom, it's like a warm hug for your throat. Beauty and brawn bottled up? Sign me up any day.
Nature's own medicine cabinet. Be magic? I'll buy that.
Funny story about Nature's Pharmacy, actually. Had this big family barbecue last summer, and wouldn't you know it, my cousin decides to impersonate a trapeze artist and falls into some rose bushes. Thorns everywhere. Now, Aunt Emma, who swears by everything natural from tofu to tea leaves, she goes full Mother Nature mode. A spot of panic, barbecued ribs forgotten, she's off into the house and comes back wielding this huge jar of honey like it's Excalibur. We're all thinking she's lost the plot, gonna sweeten the wounds or whatever. But she dollops this honey, supposedly some rare organic loot, onto the cuts after cleaning them and bandages up over it. Kid you not, cousin's scratches were looking way better even by the end of the day. Could have been Aunt Emma's confidence, or could have been that liquid gold. So yeah, be magic or not, that jar was worth its weight in sticky plasters. Next time, I'm skipping the ointment aisle and going straight for the bees.
Be magic for the win. Aunt Emma knows her stuff.
She's a natural guru. Every family barbecue needs an Aunt Emma.
No doubt Aunt Emmas make family gatherings legendary.
But seriously, Aunt Emma's aside, the sticky truth about honey is downright ancient. It's been a go-to for more than just sweet treats around the campfire. We are talking thousands of years back. Egyptians used it for wounds, and they weren't messing around with mummies. Those guys knew their embalming. You leap forward to olden Greece and Rome, and physicians are slathering it on infections like there's no tomorrow. Now fast forward to us in the 21st century, and guess what? Honey is still holding its own against modern medicine in some cases. The buzz, pun intended, around medicinal honey, especially manuka, is solid with science. It releases hydrogen peroxide, that stuff you find in brown bottles in first aid kits when it hits body moisture. Research talks about its healing properties, like stimulating tissue growth and reducing inflammation. It's not just old school cool, it's legit medical toolkit material. Imagine that, a delicious healer made by bees. Now, this is one soothing subject that won't leave anyone feeling bitter.
Honey, ancient healer now backed by science. That's sweet power.
That's a fascinating thought, Joe. So with honey's ancient roots and scientific backing, have you ever tried using it for more than just sweetening your tea? Ever dabbed some on a paper cut or a kitchen burn around your place?
Yep, it's been handy for minor cuts and burns.
Totally getting ahead of ourselves with honey's household uses, aren't we? But I've got to tell you, my kitchen is practically a honey infirmary. A scrape here or a minor burn there, and it's honey to the rescue. It's like my grandma always said, why buy the pricey ointment when bees give you the good stuff for free? Well, sort of free. Back in the day, I was a bit skeptical. Put food on wounds? Sure, Grandma. But darn if she wasn't onto something. The more you learn about its properties, the less loopy it sounds. It's moisture wicking, so it keeps wounds dry, plus that whole slow-releasing hydrogen peroxide thing helps clean them out. But you gotta be smart about it, right? Not all honey is created equal. Some have stronger medicinal properties, like the Manuka Magic from New Zealand. This isn't your average bear-friendly bottle. We're talking about premium bee brew with a unique factor called UMF, Unique Manuka Factor. So, choose wisely, because when it comes to healing with honey, not all jars are superheroes. And always remember, for serious cuts and burns, please go see a doc. Honey's cool, but it doesn't replace professional medical advice, even if it might make life a little sweeter.
Smart advice, honey helps, but leave the big stuff to docs.
You know, this reminds me of a camping trip where I ended up being the clumsiest outdoorsman you've ever seen. Fiddling with the tent, and bam, hand meets splinter, courtesy of some rogue wood. Normally I'd shrug it off, but this beast was like a mini javelin. So there I am, miles from civilization, my first aid kit's at my buddy's tent, who's wandered off to become one with nature or something. Turns out, amidst our supplies was a jar of honey tucked away by my wilderness-loving sister. She swore by it for everything, apparently even for sweet-talking grizzly bears, but that's another story. Anyhow, as the last resort, I smear some honey on after getting the splinter out, wrapped it with a bandana, and hoped for the best. By the time we packed up to head home, the thing looked way better than I expected. It wasn't scientific proof or anything, but let's just say I was grateful for that sticky jar of multitasking gold. Ever since then, I made sure my pantry and my first aid kit weren't running low on bee goodness. It sort of drives home the point. Nature often hands us simple remedies on a silver platter, or in this case, in a tiny, sticky jar. But remember, leave the serious wilderness survival drama for the rangers and docs.
To wrap it up, honey's way more than just a sweet treat. Its ancient medicinal magic is getting some well-deserved buzz again. And while we've had our fun with nature's gooey gold, let's not forget, for serious injuries, professional medical help is the way to go. Keep that honey handy, but know when it's time to call in the pros.
You nailed it, Joe. Honey is amazing for your minor mishaps, but let's not get carried away. And speaking of getting carried away, you know what really carries more than its fair weight? Cargo pants. They started off as the ultimate utility wear for those who probably had a Swiss Army knife for every day of the week, and now they're strutting down runways. It's quite the fashion conundrum, isn't it? They've gone from battlefields to catwalks without breaking a sweat or losing a pocket. What's your take on these unintended fashion icons, huh?
Cargo pants hitting the runway? That's like slapping a spoiler on a minivan. Sure, they've got pockets for days, great for stashing your phone, wallet, and even that jar of handy honey we've been raving about, but high fashion is pushing it. Anyone needs that many pockets, buy a tool belt. Fashion icons? More like fashion utilitarians. They're practical, not something I'd pair with a blazer. Stick to their roots, I say.
Oh, come on, Joe. Let's not undersell the humble cargo pants. They're the unsung heroes of practical wear, sure, but hear me out. They've got this rugged charm going for them. You know there's a line where functional meets fabulous, and cargos straddle that like bosses. Think about it. One day you're hauling your tools around, next you're off to a casual lunch, absolutely nailing that effortless "I just threw this on" look. And let's be real. If fashion is about expressing yourself, then what's better than proclaiming, "Look at me, I'm ready for anything"? Those pockets signify readiness, adventure, and who doesn't love an underdog style? Plus, you pair them with the right thing, maybe a crisp tee or even, yes, that blazer, and you've just elevated their game. It's called high-low fashion. It's edgy, it turns heads, and definitely sparks conversations, much like our chat here. So while the catwalk might seem a stretch, the sidewalks are their runway, don't you think?
Rugged charm? Sure, if we're scaling Mount Everest or trekking the Amazon. But pairing cargo pants with a blazer is like putting ketchup on prime rib. Fashion meets function, I get it, but let's not pretend cargo pants scream runway ready. They scream, I've got 10 pounds of gear and no backpack. Ready for anything? More like ready for a hike. The sidewalk isn't a trail and pockets aren't accessories. Let fashion be fashion, and cargo pants be the dad's barbecue wear they were destined to be.
Okay, Joe, I see you've got a firm stance on the cargo frontier, but think about this. Isn't fashion just a cycle? What's out of style one day rolls right back in like the tide whistle from its previous life. So maybe cargos aren't the belle of the ball just yet, but give it a minute. They're like that quiet kid in class who's secretly a genius. They'll have their moment. And when they do, all those pockets will be filled not just with tools and honey jars, but with the tears of naysayers drying up as they eat their stylish, cargo-patterned hats. Cargo pants are the tortoise in this high-fashion race, slow and steady, riddled with pockets. Mark my words, they'll be crossing the finish line in style while everyone else wonders where they can score a pair. I'm telling you, it's a revolution. The cargo revolution, coming to a sidewalk or catwalk near you. Better start stocking up before this train leaves fashion station. Choo-choo.
Cargo's taking over. I'll believe it when I see it.
Right, so I was at this coffee shop the other day. Cool little indie place with mismatched furniture and vintage posters, the whole 9 yards. I'm waiting in line behind this guy who's dressed like he stepped out of an old photograph. Suspenders, bow tie, pocket watch, and all. And right there, in front of Mr. Vintage, is this kid in a grungy band tee and ripped jeans looking like he should be at a 90s rock concert, not ordering a latte. They strike up a conversation, believe it or not, about, you guessed it, their fashion choices. Mr. Vintage is going on about his love for timeless classics, while Rock Concert Kid talks up sustainability and wearing what you've got till it falls apart. Then they turn to me and ask, what's your style philosophy? Without missing a beat, because hey, we're talking fashion and you gotta stay sharp, I say, functional and free-spirited, kinda like cargo pants. They both give this nod like I just unveiled some deep universal truth or something. I leave with my coffee thinking, man, even in a room where time periods clashed, cargos could have been the common ground. Could they be the next staple these guys adopt? Unlikely allies in the world of fashion. That's what cargo pants are.
Fashion's wild, huh? Borrow from the past, look to the future. Whether you're all about vintage vibes, rock and grunge, or yes, even our controversial cargo pants, it seems clothes are personal billboards of who we are, or at least how we feel when we rummage through the closet in the morning. It's that individuality that makes style such a rich tapestry. Just like those two at the coffee shop, coming from different worlds but sharing stories over steamed milk. That's fashion. A conversation starter, a universal language, even if it's spoken through pockets and patches.
Talk about a tapestry of individuality, right? Just like our wardrobes, life's all about making it work with what you've got at hand. Speaking of which, let me tell you about the time I realized spoons are underrated survival tools. There I was, on a camping trip turned MacGyver episode, gnawing hopelessly at a can of beans after my can opener betrayed me. But a spoon and a rock later, those beans were history. Prying, digging, reflecting sunlight to signal for extra marshmallows, the humble spoon has been the real MVP more times than I can count. Don't even get me started on spoon fishing. Resourcefulness isn't just a trait, it's a way of life. Spoons, Joe, let's talk about how they carve their way into every aspect of being resourceful.
Spoons, the unsung heroes of the utensil world.
Oh, talk about a tiny titan of the toolbox. Spoons have been around since before forks made their entrance at the dinner table. This nifty piece of cutlery isn't just for slurping soup or doling out dessert, it's multifunctional gear in the wild. Archaeologists have found evidence of spoon use going back thousands of years. Originally, they were made of wood or stone and primarily used for scooping liquids, not too far off from their main gig today. However, fast forward to modern times, and spoons are serving up survival tricks left and right. You've got your metal spoons, which can be pretty strong, capable of prying open containers, or even digging if you find yourself without a shovel. Plus, they're shiny, which makes them excellent for signaling in emergencies. You never know when you'll need to flash an SOS message across a canyon, right? Just looking at the shape of it. That scoop's ready to catch water or serve as a makeshift measuring tool. And who knew? That handle, perfect for poking around or flipping things over by the campfire without risking burns. The more you think about it, the humbler spoon isn't just for kitchen drawer clutter. It's the unsung Swiss Army knife of utensil land. Remind me again why we aren't doing a whole episode on this sterling piece of steel, Joe?
Episode on spoon survival hacks? Now that's a stirring idea.
Well, hold on a sec, Joe. An episode solely on spoons and survival might just make our listeners think we've run out of topics. I mean, sure, they're handy in a pinch, but most folks aren't out there living off the land with only their flatware to save them. And let's face it, spoons are great until you actually need something with an edge, like cutting string or preparing food. In those cases, you're out of luck with just a spoon unless you have 10 hours to saw through a twig with its dull edge. Plus, thinking practicality here, spoons are bulky compared to other multi-purpose tools like a good knife or a multi-tool. If I'm packing light, a hefty soup spoon doesn't make the cut, pun intended. So while spoons can pull off some resourceful feats, as a dedicated survival tool, maybe that's overselling our shiny friends just a tad. Survival's about the right tool for the job, and sometimes, sadly, that ain't a spoon.
Hang on, though. Spoons as exclusive survival tools? Not so far-fetched. Their versatility is key. Scoop, pry, dig, reflect signals. Lightweight and tough, they're naturally a go-to for basic tasks in a jam. They deserve more credit as survival tools because you use what you have and make it work. That's resourceful. Plus, they're common as dirt. In a real pinch, finding or fashioning a spoon is easier than stumbling upon a Swiss Army knife. So yeah, maybe we don't give spoons the spotlight they merit in the survival game.
All right, Joe, I'll give you that. We often overlook everyday items when thinking about survival situations. Sure, spoons can scoop, pry, dig, but let's be real. If I'm stuck in the wild, a spoon isn't at the top of my wish list. I've got to push back on the idea of spoons being some kind of MacGyver-ish miracle gadget. They're just not built for the tough stuff. Try chopping wood or defense against wildlife. Those aren't spoon-friendly scenarios. Yeah, they're a nifty fallback and beats having nothing. But wouldn't you rather have tools designed for the job? And when we talk resourcefulness, the best survival tool is our brains, hands down. No spoon's gonna help you if you can't figure your way out of a paper bag. But hey, I'll concede one thing. Spoons do come in clutch for eating that victory pudding after you've made it through with your actual survival skills intact. They're the comfort of civilization in the chaos of the wild, and there's something to be said for that little bit of psychological comfort, right?
No doubt, the brain's our ultimate tool. But I'm curious, Simon, given your take on spoons and survival, is there an everyday item you'd rank higher for versatility in the wild? What's your go-to non-tool tool?
Man, this reminds me of the time I was out fishing with my old man. We're sitting there, early dawn, rods in the water, and he's telling me about the good old days when he'd go on these wild backpacking trips. So there he is, deep in the backcountry, and his buddy's boot comes apart, soles flapping like it's trying to escape. Now, they're days from civilization, and this could have spelled disaster, right? But my dad, being who he is, doesn't miss a beat. He digs into his pack, pulls out, wait for it, dental floss. Yeah, you heard that right. Turns out he always carried it, not just for pearly whites, but because it's strong, light, and takes up no room at all. Long story short, he stitches that sole back onto the boot like some kind of wilderness cobbler. They finish their trip with no hitches, and that shoddy footwear even held up for months after. So whenever I hit the great outdoors, you can bet there's dental floss tucked away in my gear. It might not scoop or pry, but talk about weaving some magic in a bind.
Dental floss, the unsung hero of the backcountry repair kit.
Underrated but mighty, gotta love that string's fixing finesse.
Absolutely, never underestimate the power of the floss.
Haha, power of the floss. But pulling us back to spoons and their unexpected survival uses, it's actually fascinating when you think about it. So, historically, spoons have been more than just eating utensils. They've been crafted from a variety of materials like bone, wood, shell, and eventually metal as technology progressed. The design is simple but clever, a bowl on one end for scooping and a handle long enough to hold safely, which can also be repurposed in numerous ways. In survival scenarios, that simplicity becomes its strength. Spoons don't rely on moving parts or specific materials to function. And real talk, reflecting signals? That's classic survival know-how. A polished spoon can act like a mirror, signaling rescue planes or search parties, a lifesaver in true distress situations. Moreover, due to their durability, especially those made from stainless steel, they can withstand all kinds of abuse. They can dig into hard ground, pry open containers that might be stuck, and yes, even assist in mundane tasks like stirring a fire or eating whatever grub you forage. So while they might not be the obvious choice for a multi-tool, spoons embody resourcefulness by doing a lot with very little. Who knew these tableside buddies could double as survival sidekicks in a pinch?
Survival's secret weapon. Never doubt the humble spoon, folks.
Ha! Next time you're at a fancy dinner and someone mocks your excitement over the cutlery, lean in real close and whisper, "This spoon might just save your life one day." Watch them treat their teaspoon with a whole new level of respect or confusion. Either way, you've stirred the pot.
All right, imagine this. You're stuck in the wild. Choices are slim: spoon or no spoon? Sure, it's great for signaling, but if you think I'm going to fend off a bear with a spoon, then we're talking about some serious Bear Grylls moves. But honestly, wouldn't you rather have a good knife? If you can convince me that a spoon trumps a knife in survival, I'll eat my hat, and yeah, I'll use a spoon to do it.
All right, Joe. Knife versus spoon showdown. It's a no-brainer. A good knife is hands down your MVP in the survival league. Cutting, chopping, protection. It's king of the tool belt. But hey, if we're betting hats here, I better start watching those Bear Grylls reruns. You never know when a spoon challenge might come up. And to wrap it up, while I'm not about to knight the spoon as the ultimate survival tool, I concede it punches way above its weight class as Mr. Reliable. Look, it's like having that one friend you underestimate because they're quiet, but turn out to be a stealth ninja. So next time you scoff at your table settings, just remember the spoon's got hidden talents beyond that bowl of cereal. It's all about using what you've got creatively. But all right, I'll take the knife, you keep your hat.
Well, that's settled. Knives for the win and spoons as the underappreciated sidekick. Gotta love envisioning a stealth ninja spoon now. But speaking of accidental heroes, let's slice into our next sizzling topic: accidental genius, the microwaves we love. Folks, microwaves revolutionized the way we cook and reheat food. Way more than reheating yesterday's pizza, they were actually an accidental invention. While messing with radar tech, Percy Spencer found his chocolate bar melted. Voila, culinary innovation. Who knew an accident in a lab would lead to millions saving time and enjoying hot meals with a few button presses? Serendipity at its finest, or what, Simon?
Well, Joe, microwaves are the poster child for happy accidents, but let's consider the flip side. It's like this. You've got a tool that's changed kitchens forever, but it's also made us a bit lazy. The art of cooking, that slow simmering love affair with flavors and techniques, kind of gets nuked. And think about reheating pizza in a microwave. You expect hot, cheesy goodness, but get a rubbery mess. Sometimes you've got to respect the old ways. Ovens and stoves that treat our meals right. Plus, there's this idea that we lose some nutritional value zapping our food with those waves, though that's up for debate. My point? While microwaves are convenient, they definitely can't replace traditional cooking methods. There's value in taking your time, doing things with care, rather than always seeking the fastest route from A to B, especially when it comes to feeding our faces.
Definitely, Simon. Microwaves are a double-edged sword, convenience that may lead to culinary complacency. They're perfect for our fast-paced lifestyle, but sometimes at the expense of those slow-cooked tastes and textures we love. Still, isn't it fascinating how such a game-changing invention was stumbled upon by accident? It makes you wonder what other breakthroughs we're just one serendipitous mishap away from discovering. Now, on to another Camp Planet success story.
Haha, Joe, seriously, if I had a nickel for every time I accidentally invented something, I'd be, well, broke. But imagine Percy in that lab when his chocolate melted. It's like, Percy, you had one job, man, radar. And he's like, oops, made a kitchen appliance instead. Goes to show the best things in life are like leftovers. Sometimes they're just better the second day around.
Absolutely. The story of Percy Spencer and his melted chocolate is a staple of accidental genius lore. It was 1945 when Spencer, an engineer from Maine working on active radar equipment at Raytheon, stumbled upon the cooking potential of microwave radiation. He then created the first true microwave oven by attaching a high-density electromagnetic field generator to an enclosed metal box. Fast forward to today, the microwave oven has become an indispensable appliance in homes around the globe. It's amazing how often ingenuity is more accident than intention. That eureka moment rarely happens in a straight line. And isn't that just a delicious thought? Now, folks, not all kitchen accidents are bad. Inbox us your own kitchen mishap turned triumph and let's share a laugh or get inspired. Simon, ever had a microwave moment in life?
Oh man, Joe, my kitchen is less eureka and more oopsie daisy. My kind of accidental genius? Like that time I forgot popcorn in the microwave and nearly set off the smoke alarm. Crafted a new room freshener called Ode to Burnt Kernels. Goes to show you don't need a lab for breakthroughs, just a distracted moment, a microwave, and an appreciation for unique aromas.
Burnt popcorn, the scent of culinary chaos, Simon. Classic.
Smells like disaster. But hey, it's the little things, right?
Right, Simon. It's the little unexpected moments that often make for the best stories. Whether it's a whiff of popcorn turned smoke signal or the accidental discovery of microwaves, life has a funny way of flipping mishaps into wins. All right, folks, that wraps up the tales of unintended genius and culinary calamities. Remember to laugh at the mishaps and keep your eyes peeled for those happy accidents. They might just be your next stroke of genius. Keep sending us your kitchen fails and fabulous flukes. Until next time, this is Joe, signing off with Simon on Infinite Podcast. Stay quirky, stay clever, and who knows what you'll stumble upon.
Definitely, Joe. Here's to all the future Perrys out there working on radar and accidentally inventing our next big thing. Just goes to show you, life's a kitchen, and we're all one experiment away from our next big mess or masterpiece. Speaking of masterpieces, it's time to twist the lid off our next topic, philosophical can openers. So, automation is like that electric can opener in your drawer. Sure, it's efficient, but does making things easier actually make us lazier? Are we losing our edge? Or are those mental calories better spent on bigger problems that machines can't solve? Let's get parsing whether technology is here to pop open new possibilities or just leave us chilling until our brains turn to mush.
Electric can openers, huh? Honestly, just give me a classic manual one. There's merit in not automating every little task. Sure, automation has its place, but if we're not careful, we'll be outsourcing our entire lives to machines. What about the satisfaction of doing something with your own hands? It sharpens the mind and gives a sense of accomplishment. I'm all for tech progress, Simon, but let's not forget how to grind it out the old-fashioned way. That's where true grit comes from. Plus, there's this aspect of self-reliance. Imagine the power goes out, then what? Your electric can opener is just a paperweight, while I'm over here with my trusty hand crank tool getting dinner ready. Let's hear it for keeping our edge by balancing convenience with a good old manual effort.
Amen, Joe. Power outages fear the manual can openers might.
Exactly. While I appreciate the grind of a manual can opener, let's not forget that automation isn't inherently bad. It's about using it wisely. If automation frees up our time to tackle complex problems or engage in creative endeavors, then it's a win. But if we become overly dependent and stop challenging ourselves with basic tasks, that's when it becomes an issue. There's a balance. Use technology to enhance your life, not replace living it. Automation should open cans, sure, but it shouldn't close the door on learning or personal growth.
Ah, you hit the nail on the head. But Joe, can you imagine someone swipes right on a dating app and the bio reads, "Great with an electric can opener"? That's not skills, that's just pushing a button. We're one step away from having a robot to swipe for us. What happened to the thrill of the manual effort in romance, huh? Now it's like, hey babe, impressed by how I pushed this button. Come on, where's the challenge in that?
Swipe right for button-pushing skills? Hard pass. Remember the days when you had to muster the courage simply to say hi? We're sanitizing the thrill of the chase with a screen tap. Sure, automation in dating gives us reach and scale, but it's a thin brew compared to the rich blend of face-to-face interaction, the nerves, the charm, all that human stuff. We're spoon-feeding our lives to automation. A bit ironic, isn't it? From can openers to romance, we risk getting dull on convenience. Human grit is like a muscle. If we stop flexing it in all aspects of life, will we just atrophy? The balance is key. Let's automate the mundane, sure, but when it comes to the things that matter, let's get our hands dirty and enjoy the process. That, my friend, is living.
You know, Joe, the way I see it, once we get a robot that sighs heavily before doing chores, that's peak automation. I want my Roomba groaning as it scoops up the crumbs, gives it a human touch. And as for can openers, man, when they make one that says, Ugh, not tuna again? Then maybe I'll consider it.
A groaning Roomba? That's a bit too real for me, Simon. What we need is not robots complaining, but people remembering the value of effort. If my can opener starts whining about tuna, well, it's officially crossed over into my emotional workspace, and I didn't sign up for that. What's next? A fridge that guilt trips you about your food choices. Let's face it, we're already on an iffy slope with our gadgets making things a touch too cozy. Automation should empower us, not create a world where we're so disconnected from the real tasks at hand that we forget how to function without a smart counterpart. Remember when skills like navigating by stars or even reading a map were treasured? Now it's just, hey, phone, get me there. We throw tasks at technology and risk losing a piece of our human resilience, like a bike rusting in the shed because we only take the self-driving car. Tell me, are we truly better off with every chore automated? What are we sacrificing in the name of convenience? Let's crack this one open. Will we still appreciate the taste of effort in a world where machines do all the chewing for us?
Well, Joe, it's been a riot chewing over the chewy topics with you, as always. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and getting your daily dose of off-the-wall banter with us. Truly wouldn't be the same without you folks pitching in your thoughts and stories, too. Remember to join us again tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern for another episode where we crack open even more cans of worms, hopefully with less groaning than a Roomba on overtime. Till then, keep those hands dirty and embrace the effort. This is Simon, waxing poetic about the days of manual labor, signing off. Catch you on the flippity flip, lovely listeners.